Hello fellow YouTubers and cat lovers. We are doing part 2 of a 3-part tutorial on how to make an app specifically focused around cats, because who doesn't love cats? The last tutorial that we had, part 1, we've gotten to this point where we have our cat pictures header and a little menu popping out. You can close that menu. It's super exciting. But we're trying to get to this point right here where we actually pull in a dynamic feed of cat images. You can click on these beautiful images right here and select which ones are your favorites. It will store those locally, which ones are your favorites, so you can go through and look at all your favorite cat pictures. You can also click on them to remove your favorites, and it's just a wonderful world of cats. So we're diving back into our HTML, our CSS, and our JavaScript to finish out pulling in a feed for the cats. So to do that, I've went ahead and I've got my main.css open here, index.html, and functions.js. Now, once again, in part 1, I told you I use an editor called Komodo Edit. Works beautifully. I love it. You can use whatever text editor you like. That's just my personal preference. So we're going to go through first of all and kind of finish up our CSS because I've obviously done this before. I know how I want everything to look. Let's just go ahead and plug this in, get it out of the way so that we can move on to the meat of this tutorial, which is going to be pulling in the feed for the JavaScript. So I've got my nav menu. A is the last thing we set up inside of here to give us this beautiful menu right there. Now what we also want to do is style our background. So I've got this nav background in here. What that's going to do is give us that darker background whenever we click on the menu to kind of fade everything else out to black. So we're going to go ahead and add that in. Let me come over here to my CSS. So right under nav menu A, I'm going to click, do my ID here for nav background. And we're going to give it a width of 100%. The height is going to be 100% so that it covers everything. And we're going to set the initial display to none because we only want it to show whenever that nav show is triggered, whenever we add that class to show. So display is none. The background is going to be black, which is 0, 0, 0. Set the opacity to 0. Position is fixed. Top left, and we talked a little bit about fixed positioning in the last tutorial. The fixed positioning is specifically so that if we scroll down on our pictures, scroll down here, and then if we click on this, it's still going to cover the entire screen. If we had an absolute positioning, it's going to show up the top and just kind of be weird. So we want to keep it that fixed positioning so it's always at the top left at 0, 0. Setting the z index to 1, we just want that to be higher than what everything else is. And let's set our transition to all 0.8 seconds, and I just determined that was a cool number. Ease. Again, this transition is what's going to allow the actual animation to happen so that we don't have just a stagnant pop and then all of a sudden there's a black background. We want to have it fade in nicely so it just looks pretty because we like things to look pretty. Alright, so now what we want to do is style what it's going to look like when it is actually shown. So we have our nav ID dot show. This dot show, again, we're adding the class and the functions. Nav.toggle class show. That happens whenever we click on this logo. It adds the class of show to that parent element. Now keep in mind one thing that I had a lot of emails on. You want to have the nav and the class of show right next to each other. Don't put a space in the middle of them because when you do that, it expects the nav as the parent, show as another child element, and then nav background would be our next one. It would expect that to be the final child element. But nav and show are on the same div. So those two need to be squished together for this whole thing to work. Alright. So whenever the navigation is shown, we're going to set the z index to 8. The opacity to 0.5. and displayed block. Now one question you also might have is why in the world are we setting the display to none up here if the opacity is 0? Well, if we had a display block and had the opacity set to 0, you would have this invisible div covering the entire thing, and you wouldn't be able to click anything because it would be in front of everything. So we have to actually set it to display none. That way you can actually click everything behind it. So with all that set up, whenever we hit that menu, it's going to add the class of show, and you should see a nice, pretty black kind of covering behind everything. And there it is. So you can play around with the, the opacity of it and all that kind of stuff to get it exactly how you want it. But that's how I have it set up in this tutorial. All right. So the final thing that we want to do here is I'm going to set up my feed. I want this to look pretty to where, there we go, scroll up to the top, so that my images are nice and full screen and they, everything's stretched and looks uniform. So this is how we're going to set it up inside of our CSS. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set my feed, which is the ID that I want to be loading everything in. I'm going to set that to display block. And that's it. You can play around and add more things if you'd like to later on that. Then I've got my page. Again, page inside of here is going to work for both of these. So I have the class of page on both of them, and it's going to go through and add any CSS that I add to this page class. It'll add it to both. So the page image, actually I want to affect the image tag inside of that page. I'm going to set the width to 95%. If I can type, there we go. And the margin is going to be 10 pixels in auto. Again, the 10 pixels is going to be the margin on the bottom and the top. And auto is going to space it out evenly between both sides so that it's centered. And then I'll set the display of these images to block. And that will make sure that that margin works. The final thing I want to do is every time I favorite an image, I'm going to add the class of Fav to the link that I'll be setting up in a minute here. So Fav image, I'm going to put a border on it, and this just signifies that our image is favorited, and it gives you a visual representation that, hey, I love this image. So you can also set this up in the form of using an icon that'll appear with a star or anything like that. But this is just how I'm doing this in this particular tutorial. All right, so you're not going to see anything quite yet. If you wanted to test it out, we could actually go through and just add in yeah, we're not going to do it right now. But you could add in, like when I was first doing this, you put in a link and you put in any random image so you can just see how it looks. But we're going to go ahead and dive into the JavaScript just to make sure we don't make this video too incredibly long here. So we'll dive into the JavaScript and how everything's set up to load in everything that we're going to need. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's load in some images. So underneath my logo click function, I'm going to comment out here, and we'll just say loading the feed. Again, these comments right here, it's just for you. It doesn't actually do anything to your code, but it's, if you have any questions or anything like that. So what we're going to be working on here is pulling in these images via AJAX. AJAX is a method used to get data that is outside of your current site or outside of your current page and pull it into that page. So instead of loading a new page or anything like that, we're going to be loading something externally and actually pulling it in. So I have this data set up. I'm going to pull this out here and we'll get rid of our cats. So I set this on my own server just to make it simple, simple.com. And I call it catjson.php. So what this is right here is this is a bunch of data laid out in a way that we can read it with JavaScript. So we've got the data, we've got all the URLs to everything, and the ID of the image, and then also the source URL, which is about the same thing. So we're going to be pulling in all this information. We're going to be grabbing the URL to the image, and we're going to be grabbing the ID and storing it locally. All right. So let's go ahead and get set up doing that. So how you do an AJAX call with JavaScript is you do your little $sign here, which is going to initiate the JavaScript, or the jQuery, sorry. And you do a open parenthesis and open curly bracket. You have to tell what URL you're going to be going out to, so http://simple.com, that's without an ISMPLE, /catjson.php. And that's going to go out to my server, and it's going to pull in that JSON, that sample file that we have. We need to tell jQuery that the data type that we're pulling in is in fact JSON. Setting this right here, cross domain, to true actually allows you to pull something in from an outside domain. If you didn't have that set and I didn't allow it from my server, you would not be able to pull in that URL to an external file. It's a security thing that kind of helps me out and helps you out. Success. This is what's going to happen when it actually successfully goes out to my server and pulls everything in. We need to put in the variable of JSON here, because that's basically when it successfully reaches my server and pulls everything in, it's going to store it in this JSON variable right there that we set up. So just to test to make sure it works, we can do this console.log JSON. And inside of Chrome, let's see here, let's open it up this way. You can click your little 3 bars here. And I forget where it is this way, view, JavaScript, console, more tools, there we go. So if you go right here inside of Google Chrome, JavaScript console, you can click this button to undock it if you want to. I'm going to do that so you can actually see it. And when you refresh your page, you should see this object response object. That tells us it's successfully pulled in. See, it's coming from functions.javascript line 21, which this is on line 21 where I put that console.log. If you click this arrow next to it and just keep clicking down through the arrows, eventually you will see all of your images. These are, we have 18 different objects, 19 actually, because it starts at 0. And you can see inside of here, it's all that information that we were just looking at on the server, but it's laid out pretty in here that you can actually read it. So what we're going to be doing with this information is we're going to be pulling in each individual piece of this and setting it up to display inside of our page. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move this window kind of out of the way here so we can continue to look at this JSON while we write our code. I'm going to leave that console.log there just to make sure that everything's loading correctly. And I'm going to set up a variable for my images. So what this is going to do, our images equals json.response.data.images.image. It seems like a lot, but this is just the structure that this particular one set up. So what this is going to do is it's going to store inside of a variable of images. It's going to restore, let's see, JSON is the initial data where everything's stored. It's going to go to response, and then it's going to go to data. It's going to go to images, and then it's going to go to this image. Now inside of this image area here, that's where we have all of our objects set up. So 0 through 18, 19 total. We have them all set up inside of this image array. So what all this does right here is for our images is it drills down to where that array of 19 images are and stores it inside that variable, so it's just much easier to look at instead of looking at this long string. Alright, so now that we've got those 19 objects stored inside of that images variable, what we want to do is loop through each of them one at a time and actually display it inside of the HTML. So how we do that, we go through here, we're going to use something called a for loop. And let me type it out and I'll kind of explain it like I normally do. So for I equals 0, while I is less than images dot length I plus plus. All right. So what this does, this for is saying, okay, so we're going to put up some arguments in here, some conditions that have to be met. And while these conditions are being met, it's going to continually loop through. So it's saying while we're going to set a variable of I equal to 0. This just basically sets the variable of I to 0. It gives us a starting point of where to start this loop. And you typically start a loop at 0. And while I, which is 0, so while 0 is less than images, which is referencing this up here, which gives us 19 different objects. So while I is less than the length of images, which is 19, I plus plus. What that does is it says, okay, so I'm starting at 0. While I is less than 19, I'm going to add 1 to I, and then I'm just going to keep going. So I is going to equal to 1. So while 1 is less than 19, I'm going to add 1 more. 2. While 2 is less than 19, I'm going to add 1 more. And so on until it hits 19. 19 is not less than 19, so it would stop at that point. But what we're going to do with that is we're going to use it to go through each of these objects. And you see that these are all numbered 0 through 18. So we're going to grab the ID and the URL from each of these. So we're going to set up the ID first. We'll set a variable of ID and make that equal to images, which again is this array of 19 different objects that we have. You do a open and close bracket and stick that I in the middle. So images 0. So what we're doing here is we're coming inside of this image array and we're grabbing object 0. And inside of object 0, we want to grab the ID. So it's going to come into object 0 here and look for the text ID. And so it's going to store DHL inside of that ID. All right. The next thing we want to do is get the URL. So var URL equals images I URL. So again, it's going to come in images. It's going to start out at 0, and it's going to grab the URL. So the URL is this right here on Tumblr. And once it's done with that, we want to take that information and I'm going to stick the HTML from that into my feed. So we're going to say feed, which again, the ID of feed comes from that page right there. We have ID feed. We're going to say feed dot append, and appending to the feed is basically going to say, okay, here's our feed div. We're going to put, say I appended something to it once, it's going to do that. If I append again, it's going to put it underneath that. If I append again, it's going to put it underneath that, and it's just going to keep going. Let me stick this back where it was because I like it to be pretty. Alright, so we have feed and append. href equals, and I'm just going to hashtag that because we don't actually need a link in anywhere. We're going to set the ID. I'm going to call it cat image hyphen. And we're just going to leave it at that right now, actually. I'm going to set the class equal to cat pic. And image source is going to be the URL, which we'll plug in a second. I always like to write my code first, and then I go back in and plug in my variables and whatnot. So this is the basic link that I want to put inside of here. So ahref equals hashtag because it doesn't need to go anywhere. The ID, I'm going to plug in this ID variable that we have. To plug in a variable in the middle of a string in jQuery or any JavaScript, you want to go ahead and close the string. So you have the double quotes to open the string and double quotes to close the string. Add a plus sign, and the variable that you would like to insert, and then do the open quotes to continue the string. So this just kind of puts a little break in the string and says, hey, we want to add something in the middle, which is going to be that variable. We want to do the same thing with the source of our image. So quote plus URL plus double quote. All right. So what we have right here, ahref equals hashtag, ID is cat image hyphen plus ID. So it's going to be, the ID would be DHL on that one. Class equals catpic, and that's just so that we can style it later if we wanted to. Image source equals URL, and the URL that's going to plug in there is tumblr.com/yada yada yada. And then of course we close our anchor element. So it's going to add that to the feed, and then it's just going to keep on going until it runs out of objects to add. So there should be 18 total. All right. So I'm going to come in here and refresh my page, and we should see some images appear unless we have an error. And we don't. Awesome. So we have all these images appearing. Looks wonderful. You know, one thing I did notice I must have missed in my CSS is this picture is going behind my header. Let me hop over to my CSS and look at my feed. So feed display is block, and you know what? Page is where I want to add this to because I want to fix this on both of them. So page, we're going to have the padding top. My nav menu, no, that's the header. My header height is 60 pixels. So let's go ahead and add a padding to the top of this of 60 pixels. That way it pushes all of my cat pictures down nicely. All right, so we have all of our cat pictures appearing beautifully. If we scroll down and continue to scroll, we can see more and more cat pictures, and we love it because everybody loves cat pictures for some reason. So that is it for loading in the cat pictures with jQuery. Next, we will be moving on to actually adding in the ability to favorite cat pictures and to show that, hey, we really like this one. Alright, so let's save some favorite cat pictures now, which is just incredible because we all love cat pictures. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this class of cat pic that we set up inside of here, and we're going to use that to actually save our cat pictures. So I'm going to do document.onClick.catPic function, and you might say, John, why in the world did you write all of that when you could have just done logo.click? Simple jQuery. Whenever you load something in dynamically using AJAX, it's an element that wasn't there to begin with. So this logo.click, I can click that easily because it's already there. Now, if I were to use .catpic.click, I wouldn't be able to click on these because it wasn't there to begin with. Now, however, our document has always been there. So what we're going to do here is when something is clicked on our document and it has the class of catpic, then we can run a function. So you use document.onClick or on mouse over, whatever you need to do, whenever you're doing something involving content that was loaded in after everything's been loaded. So AJAX content, basically. So we have this document on click catpic that's going to happen whenever our catpic is clicked. The first thing I always do if I know that I don't want it to do, I don't want it to actually function like a link and take you somewhere, I'm going to type in return false. Again, that just keeps it from actually trying to go to a URL or something. And now I want to grab the ID and the URL from the catpic that I'm clicking, so from this class. So we'll say var ID equals this dot attribute ID. So that's going to pull in this ID right here from the class of catpic. And the URL of our URL is going to be this dot children. If I can type again. There we go. This dot children image dot attribute source. So that's going to pull us to, we have this anchor element right here, which is our parent, and the image is our child. So we're going to go to the child of image and pull in the attribute of source, which will give us the URL. So right now we have the ID and the URL. We need to use that information to store it locally in a database to determine whether or not we want to save it as a favorite or remove it from a favorite. So every HTML5 website now typically has some sort of a database associated with it if they're storing information. You can use that inside of apps to easily store information. It works beautifully. So we're going to check first to see if it's stored, if it's there. So to do that, we're going to say if local storage dot get item ID is not equal to null. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking to see if this ID, so if cat image hyphen whatever the unique ID is, we're going to check to see if it's already in our storage. If it is not equal to null. Yeah, so if it's already in our storage, we want to remove it. So if it's in there, we're going to say local storage dot remove item ID. Okay. And when we do that, we also want to remove it from our favorites. So with that, we'll say faves. We want to look for anything with the ID that is associated with that, dot remove. All right. So again, first right here, local storage dot remove item ID. We are removing this from storage. Secondly, we are removing the element from the faves list. However, if it is not in storage, so if it does not find the ID inside of storage, we want to stick it in there. So we'll say local storage dot set item ID, and you can set another attribute with that ID. So we have the ID set. Let's go ahead and store the URL with that. What we can do is use that information and pull it in to display inside of our feed. So local storage.set item ID and URL. And another last thing that we want to do here is toggle the class of fave. So we'll say this.toggle class fave. That way, if it has fave class on it, it'll remove it, and vice versa. If it doesn't have fave class, it will add it. All right. So we can also test this again. Go ahead and pull out your console window. If you have closed it, you can come up here to your little three bars, go to More Tools, and JavaScript console. So you can pull that up and go to a place called Sources. No, Resources. I know it was something Sources. Inside of here, you can go to Sources and look inside of local storage. I'm going to refresh my cat app and look at my local storage. And you can click on a picture. And there we go. And when you refresh it, you will see cat image DHL. Click on the next one. Let's refresh button down here. And you can refresh it, and you can see the next one. So you can see these adding and removing. You can remove them both as well and refresh it. Refresh, and they're removed. So it is storing and removing them. So what we'll do now is we'll use that data to pull it into our Favs feed. Now we want that Favs feed to reload every time we click Favs because it's going to change. So we're going to come up here and create a function to load our favorites every single time. So we'll say function load faves, open close parentheses and open your brackets. This function that we're creating, we're going to be able to just call it over and over again, and it's super easy. All right, so the first thing we want to do is clear out what is currently in our faves. So inside of that faves div, we want to clear our HTML. So just set your HTML to blank, and your faves div is right here. We're just going to clear out anything that might be in there. All right. After that, we're going to load in everything inside of our local storage. So we're going to pull up to do this. I'm just going to tell you here because it takes a little bit of Googling to figure out. So local storage, object.keys local storage dot for each. This for each is going to pull in every single item inside of your local storage. And we're going to say here function key. And it'll tell you what that key is from your local storage. All right. We're going to check and see, and once again, you can just write this out. I did some Googling to figure out how to check and see if cat image is actually in there. Yeah, you can definitely do some Googling to find that. All right, so this little string of text right here, that little string of text makes it to where it looks and see if cat image is appended in front of any keys inside of your storage. So you have all these variables being stored in there. Some are not going to be your cat images. They might be a username or something like that. This is going to find the ones that are specifically have that cat image in front of it, so we can figure out which ones are our favorites. All right. And once it does that, we can go var URL, grab that URL, local storage dot get item key. So it's going to get the URL from the key that is set. Really hope this is making sense because it actually sounds kind of complicated, but it's super simple when you look at it. I'm going to go back to my JavaScript console. We're going to look at the resources, not the sources. And let's go ahead and click on a couple of these. All right. So I'm going to delete some of these just so, yeah, it's not deleting, whatever. All right, so what we're doing here, object key, all of these are keys. You see it actually says key at the top, key value, key value. So object key, it's going to loop through all of the keys inside of our local storage. In this case, we have 4. We have cat image, score, wrong. Score and wrong is from another application that I'm building. So we have these cat images here, and we're pulling in the key and checking to make sure that it's just cat image. So it's looking for that cat image beginning right there. So it's going to completely ignore score and wrong. And from that, we are grabbing the URL. So local storage.get item key is going to get the item that has cat image in front of it, so cat image hyphen whatever that is, and cat image hyphen DHL, and it's going to pull in these 2 values into our URL variable. So all of that to say, it grabs our URL. So now that we have that URL, we also have the key, which is going to be the ID. We can add this to our favorites just like we appended this. So I'm going to come through here and just copy and paste that and change it up a bit. So we have Favs, and we're going to append that key, href ID equals, I'm going to actually delete this cat image part because we don't need that anymore, and change ID to key because we're accessing the key right here, which is going to be the ID. Class equals cat pick. I'm going to go ahead and add the class of fav inside of here so we know it's our favorite, and image source equals URL. Beautiful. So right now we have a function that's going to load in our favorites, but we don't have anything triggering that function to make it work. What we want to do is every single time from the menu, every time we click on this favorites, we're going to trigger that function to refresh our feed and grab our favorites again, because we might add some new favorites, so we want to run that every single time. So I'm going to add one more little snippet at the top here. We have nav menu a dot click equals function, and again the nav menu's been there from the beginning of time. It's right here, it's coded into our site, so we can just use click. We don't have to use document on or anything like that. What we're going to do is we're going to take this feed and faves, and we're going to load the ID of feed or faves based on which anchor element we click inside of nav menu. Let's go back to here. Again, I'm going to return false because I don't want this trying to launch any URLs or anything going haywire on me. And I'm going to set a variable for my href for the where it's going to be going. It's going to be this dot attribute href, dot replace. I'm using this replace here to take out the hashtag. I have these hashtags inside of here. I'm just using replace to get rid of them because I don't like hashtags in my stuff. And we're going to say if href equals faves, we're going to run the function load faves. Now, this in itself, it would load the favorites, but it's not going to actually show my favorites feed. So what I need to do is actually, what I'll be doing is hiding both of these pages classes, and then I'll be using the ID to determine which one I want to show. So we're going to say page.hide, which will hide both of them quickly. And we're going to look for that ID that we just stored and show it. So we're going to be looking for the ID of faves or feed. You see I use that the string right here for the hashtag showing that it's an ID. Plus sign href will give us what ID it is specifically using that variable. And then after it's all said and done here, we want to hide our navigation drawer again so that doesn't stay open. So we're going to say nav toggle class show, just like we did up here. Nav toggle class show, that'll just get rid of it. Everything will be good. So what will be happening here is whenever we click our favorites, it's going to load that. Oh, I think I have an error. Yes, we can see what errors look like. Undefined is not a function. So I opened up my JavaScript console here. I'm kind of excited I got an error because I haven't gotten one in a while. More tools, again, JavaScript console. And this will tell us what our error is. Uncaught type error, undefined is not a function on line 31. So let's hop over to line 31 here. And we have this object.keyLocalStorage.forEach function key. Undefined is not a function on this, so we'll go through here and see what might not be defined. Oh, I have a typo. Object.key is not a variable. It's object.keys is going to pull in all the keys. So it's simple typo this time around. Let's see if that corrects it. So cat pictures, favorites, and it's giving me another one on line 32. I must have the same thing going on here. Line 32. So line 32 here, I just noticed, so I've got text instead of what should be test. So yeah, test key is basically testing to see if that cat image part is in there. All right, let's refresh again. And I get no errors. It's a beautiful thing. And here are my two favorite images. So when I click on that, it will remove them as well. And I can click back over to my feed, like some more things, come back over here and click favorites again. It's going to load in all my favorites. So it's a thing of beauty. We can see all of our cat pictures. It's absolutely wonderful, and we love it. So what this does is it gives us a real quick, simple application. We're pulling in cat pictures dynamically from the web, and we can take all this information now, package it up inside of a nice little package, which we'll go over in the next step here. And you can actually push this out to multiple platforms, including Android, iOS, and Windows phones. Please let me know if you have any questions. Shoot me an email at simplejohn@gmail.com or leave a comment under here on YouTube as well. Thanks a lot. Bye.